Hey friend, how you doing? This is Tim Shurr, and I wanted to give you a free copy of an audiobook from this one that I wrote in 2004 called The Power of Optimism. And it's all about choosing an attitude that's going to help you feel safe, confident, and secure. As I always say, it's not what shows up, it's how you show up that matters most. So I hope you enjoy these resources to help you get through this coronavirus that we're getting through. The more tools and resources you have for feeling mentally strong and prepared, the better you're going to be. So I hope you enjoy.
Shurr Success Seminars presents The Power of Optimism, written and read by author Tim Shurr. Produced by Sure Things Productions, copyright 2000. Tim is a holisticist, hypnotist, author, motivational speaker, and president of the International Association of Holistic Medicine. And now, Tim Shurr.
Welcome to the Power of Optimism. I am so excited to be able to come into your life and share with you some of what I've been working on for the past decade. A long time ago, I started playing a game with myself, where I pretended that you had hired me to scour the fields of psychology, theology, and human potential. I got the idea from a gentleman who did the same thing about 70 years ago. He was hired to study the most successful people in the world and then author a book describing all the characteristics that made these people so prosperous. This book, which I highly recommend, is entitled Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So this is what I did. I studied the most successful, peaceful, happy people that I could find throughout history, just to see how they could thrive so well in a world that can be so tough. In doing so, I found that each one of these people I studied had very similar characteristics and beliefs. One of these characteristics was that they were all optimists. So I imagine that you hired me to go out into the world and figure out how to be an optimist in the 21st century. Well, after 14 long years, I'm finally ready to give you a summary of the knowledge that I've acquired. And I think that you're going to be very, very pleased. In this program, you're going to hear some ideas and strategies for molding yourself into an optimist. This is the key ingredient to becoming a confident, secure, and successful human being. In other programs, I discuss the steps to creating wealth and prosperity based on what I've learned from those that I've studied. But the most important step in the whole process is what I'm about to focus my attention on now. That is, on possessing the view of an optimist. Now, I'm not saying that you have to become an optimist. All I want to do is share with you why it's such an exceptionally good idea to become one, and then teach you how to become one. If you decide to put these ideas into action, well, that'll be up to you. I decided to break this down into a couple easy steps. First, I'll talk about what an optimist is and the benefits of becoming one. Next, I'll explain why so many people are pessimists. Finally, I'll give some tips and suggestions for how to become an optimist. If you're already an optimist, this program will serve as more fuel to keep your fire burning bright. If you're not, however, then I recommend you allow yourself to get really excited because you're about to get a crash course in how to feel happy, fulfilled, and prosperous. In my experience, it's the people who actively seek out programs like the one that you're listening to right now that get results. These people learn that you don't have to go without if you can just learn to go within. And learning how to live in a state of optimism is a key to the whole process. This is what really excites me the most about working with you. Yes, I said you. Your listening to this program confirms that you are one of these enlightened individuals, whether you know it yet or not. This is why I am honored to come into your life and walk with you along your road to success. So thank you very much for listening, and have a great time. We shall begin our exciting program with an overview of optimism. Most people think that optimism is just positive thinking, but I believe it goes way beyond that. Positive thinking is very important because you're saying supportive, loving things to yourself, which is good, especially when what you say to yourself creates how you feel. And how you feel determines how you behave. And how you behave shapes your reality. I'm going to say this again because it's so incredibly important. What you say to yourself, the thoughts you have, the images or pictures in your mind, these are directly responsible for creating how you feel. How you think will determine how you are going to feel about yourself. If you say positive, loving, encouraging things to yourself, you're going to feel positive and loved and encouraged. If, however, you say negative, critical, worrisome things to yourself, you're going to feel negative, judged, and worried. Plus, the way that you feel will dictate every action you take. If you continually tell yourself, for example, that you're going to mess things up, it'll never work, or why even try, the odds are that you will mess up, fail, or not even try. And it's not because you weren't good enough or you couldn't succeed, but more that you told yourself you wouldn't be successful. And truthfully, we tend to believe ourselves. So please write down the following phrase, or etch it into your brain if you're driving. What you think about comes about. What you think about comes about. Okay, come on, say it with me. Now you better say it with me too. What you think about comes about. Good. Now I want to make a clarification. Although I am a strong advocate of positive thinking, optimism goes way beyond just saying nice things to yourself. To me, optimism is a positive, loving, and enthusiastic state of being. It's a way of living in which you actively search out the very best in yourself, others, and the world around you. Optimistic people have strong faith in a love and beauty greater than themselves, and they keep their eyes wide open, always hoping to catch a glimpse of it. Being an optimist myself, I am continuously seeking to discover the hidden wisdom or masked opportunity that any circumstance may bring my way. I have trained myself to look for solutions instead of problems, always looking for the good versus the bad. After all, one of my life secrets is that whatever you look for hard enough, you will find. If you keep your eyes focused on problems, all you're ever going to find are more problems. But if you keep your eyes firmly locked onto finding solutions, what are you going to find? That's right, you're going to find solutions, and you're going to find a lot of them. Like I tell my clients in my private counseling practice, even on the darkest, cloudiest, rainiest day, the sun is still shining. You just can't see it. So even when life is the toughest and problems seem to surround you, know that solutions are right here within reach if you just trust in your ability to find them. This, my friend, is the essence of being an optimist. Okay, now that I've philosophized a little bit with you, let me share some advantages and disadvantages of being an optimist. As a professional speaker, I've had the privileges of talking with thousands of people, and every once in a while, I'll run across somebody who says, "I've been a pessimist my whole life. Why should I change?" My first thought is always, well, 'cause it'll make you smile more for one. But I don't usually say that out loud. Instead, I created a list of characteristics or traits which describes both an optimist and a pessimist. And being the nice guy that I am, I'm going to share this list with you. Are you ready? I said, are you ready? Good. I just love an active audience. The following is a list of characteristics associated with an average, everyday pessimist. Pessimists tend to be sick twice as much as optimists. Pessimists tend to have more headaches, stomach aches, and colds. Pessimists have less energy, feel more tired, and complain of being overly stressed. Pessimists tend to make less money, procrastinate more often, miss deadlines, and report job dissatisfaction. Pessimists worry constantly experience more feelings of guilt and have a harder time saying no. Pessimists experience more fear in their lives, especially fear of what the future might hold. They tend to use self-limiting statements such as, "If I don't get my hopes up, I won't be disappointed." Pessimists seem to attract more bad luck, problems, and disappointments into their lives. They also tend to feel a sense of helplessness. Pessimists often feel like they are victims who have no control over what happens in their lives. Finally, pessimists suffer more mental illness, including panic and anxiety attacks, phobias, and depression. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I've yet to find an optimist who is depressed. Even pessimists hate to be called a pessimist. I once asked someone who was supporting a pessimistic attitude why they don't like to be referred to as a pessimist. And you know what their reply was? "It's so icky. I don't want to be associated with being a pessimist, even when I know I'm acting like one." Being a pessimist is so unattractive, even the pessimists don't want to be one. Now here's a list of characteristics associated with the average everyday optimist. Optimists tend to be twice as healthy, happy, and wealthy compared to pessimists. Optimists are more successful in their endeavors and are often great achievers. Optimists look for solutions and positive outcomes, and they find them. Optimists tend to be more understanding and confident in relationships at work and in their personal lives. Optimists often experience more peace and feel as though they have personal power over their own life. They embrace the future and use empowering self-statements such as, "I don't have control over the cards I'm dealt in life, but I always have control over how I'm going to play the hand." Finally, optimists reported feeling stronger mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So those are the advantages of being an optimist. What are the disadvantages of being an optimist? Well, I haven't found any yet, but if I ever do, I'll let you know. These days, when I run across somebody who defiantly states that they were born pessimistic and that's just how they're going to stay, I warmly look them in the eye and reply, "Well, if that's what you choose." Notice I said, "if that's what you choose." I make it a point to clearly identify that 1, nobody is born a pessimist, and 2, it is a choice. When speaking about pessimism, I rarely call people pessimists. Instead, I refer to him or her as someone who is supporting a pessimistic attitude. Now, you may hear me call someone a pessimist in this program, but it's only for brevity's sake. Nobody is born a pessimist or an optimist. We are merely shaped into one from the moment we are born. Yes, your innate temperament may preclude you towards being more cautious versus outgoing, for example. But your outlook on life is completely up to you. Just because you might have been brought up in a certain way or with a certain set of beliefs does not mean that you have to be a slave to that old style of thinking if it no longer serves you in a positive way. If there was no choice in the matter and we were simply products of our environment and chemistry, then no one would ever be able to change, and I'd be out of a job. But people can, and do, change all the time. You've heard stories of those born dirt poor, but who took charge of their lives and their attitudes and went on to become millionaires. I'm willing to bet a year's pay that they didn't do it with a pessimistic attitude. Now, if your first thought is, "Yeah, well, that guy was lucky," or "that would never happen to me," you just keep saying that to yourself and you'll be absolutely right. But do you really want to be right in that particular case? Or would you rather change your mind, which could ultimately change your life? But hey, I'm not here to tell people what to think or how to live. After all, I'm only responsible for how I live. But being an optimist makes me feel so good. I can't help but share the wisdom and blessings that you can and will experience from developing an optimistic attitude. In my speaking engagements, I often share a story that illustrates the difference between being an optimist and a pessimist. So now I'm going to share this story with you. Ready? I said, are you ready? Good. There was this father who had 2 boys, both 8 years old. Now, one of those boys was really optimistic, really go-lucky and positive. But the other boy was an extreme pessimist, always worried and full of gloom. One day, the father thought, "It cannot be healthy for my boys to be so extreme one way or the other." So that night, he came up with a plan. He waited for the boys to fall asleep in their own separate rooms, and then he sneaked into his pessimistic son's room and scattered brand new toys all over the floor. He filled the room with presents. Then he sneaked into his optimistic son's room and spread horse manure all over the floor, big, thick piles of it. Then he went back to bed. The following morning, the father was awakened by a loud cry coming from his pessimistic son's room. He ran into his pessimistic son's room and found his son sitting there surrounded by all these unopened presents, crying. He looked at his boy and he said, "Son, why are you crying?" His pessimistic son said, "Daddy, oh daddy, I can't play with any of these toys. What if I break one?" Then the father heard a bunch of yelling coming from his optimistic son's room. He ran into his optimistic son's room and found his son diving into the piles of horse manure. He was splashing and throwing it around. The father exclaimed, "Boy, what are you doing?" The optimistic son yelled back, "Daddy, oh daddy, I know there's a pony in here somewhere." Now I know. My optimists think this is funny, and my pessimists always think it's a crappy story. And whatever you think is fine. The point is that life is just better when experienced through the eyes of an optimist. In the next section, we're going to talk about why so many people have fallen into the trap of pessimism, and consequently, why those people keep attracting everything they don't want into their lives. It's a really fascinating and a bit unsettling, if you ask me, discussion on how America has become a nation full of professional negative thinkers. So stay tuned, because this is something you're not going to want to miss. Welcome back. In this section, I said I would explain why so many people focus on their worries, fears, and worst possible outcomes. Without fail, when I'm on the road giving lectures on the importance of maintaining a positive attitude, people will ask where their negative thoughts come from and why they always seem to have so many of them. Audience members tell me their negative thoughts come from out of nowhere, and when they try to stop them, even more seem to appear. They also add that they don't feel like they have any control over their minds. And do I have any suggestions? And as always, I reply, "Sure, I have plenty of suggestions for you." If we were at a lecture like this, and you had just asked me those set of questions, this is how I would reply. Let me start by sharing a story with you. This story illustrates the importance of realizing that if we keep doing the same things in our lives, thinking the same thoughts, taking the same actions, we will continue to get the same results. As the saying goes, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. My favorite definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. Okay, on to the story. Once upon a time, there were 8 people in group therapy. One morning, the therapist came in and decided to conduct an exercise in which each person would write down his or her life story. But the therapist, knowing he had to read all of these stories, told them to summarize their life story on a cue card. They did, and one of these cue cards captured the essence of change so well that it was actually turned into a very popular book. Would you like to know what was on that cue card? No. I'm just kidding. The cue card read, Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walked down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It's not my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit now. But this time, my eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault I'm here. I take full responsibility, and I get out right away. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk all the way around it, and I keep on going. And Chapter 5. I take another street. Everybody seems to have those holes in the sidewalk that we fall into, or those brick walls that we run up against, or those blocks that seem to keep us stuck. And what happens is we keep blaming other people for our situation, which does absolutely nothing and can often make the situation worse. We have to begin to realize that the only way our life is going to change is by having enough courage to take responsibility, accountability for what happens in our lives. Behavioral psychologists suggest that we are simply a product of all the choices we've made up until now. In fact, there's a saying that goes, if you want to know how you got to where you are right now, look at all the choices you've made in your past. And if you want to know what your future will be like, look at all of the choices that you're making right now. Well, we can't do anything about the past, except, of course, learn from it. But we sure can do a lot about what we're doing right now. So let's talk about where all those pesky little negative thoughts come from, and why there seems to be so many of them. I would like you to imagine that your mind is like a garden. If you ever took care of a garden before, you know that it takes a lot of work. One reason why is because weeds are always growing in that garden. You don't have to water them, give them sunshine, or nurture those weeds in any way, and they'll still continue to grow. In fact, they seem to have such a strong will to live, I've seen them growing up through the cracks of a sidewalk in downtown Chicago. Our negative thoughts are like those weeds. So where do our mental weeds come from? I wondered this myself, so I went to my books and found some statistics that were a bit unsettling, but quite mind-opening. The first set of statistics I ran across suggested that by the time we are 18 years old, on average, we've heard about 180,000 negative thoughts directed our way, either intentionally or unintentionally. If you break that down, it's about 25,000 hours of negativity that the subconscious mind records and keeps in the back of your head. The statistics also suggested that 75% of this occurs by the time we are 8 years old. Have you ever heard the expression that our lives are run by our inner 8-year-old? Well, if you haven't, you have now. They say this because many cognitive psychologists believe that our schemas, or our core set of beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world we live in, are defined by the time we're 8 years old. And we spend the rest of our lives reinforcing many of these original beliefs. Where do we get our beliefs from? Well, we pretty much internalize the beliefs of our parents, peers, teachers, our religion, and from society at large. For instance, do you remember the first time your parents put you down on the ground and let you crawl around on your own? If so, do you remember the first words they said to you? I do. They said, "No, no, no, don't do that. No, don't do that, Timmy. No, no, no." Now that didn't mean that my parents were yelling at me or I was inherently bad or anything. I was just such a handful as a kid. I was probably trying to eat the cat or something. However, from thousands of unintentional comments such as those, I began subconsciously believing that I wasn't quite capable enough of taking care of myself, which led to the belief that I'm just not good enough. About 85% of the population shares that same belief right this minute. Do you? From that belief alone, that I'm not good enough, came a barrage of negative thoughts and self-limiting affirmations that defined and shaped my life. Until, of course, I decided to change that. I'm going to give you another example, but I want you to remember that blame is not the game. Kids aren't born with a manual, and most parents do the best darn job that they can with what they know. Let me say that again. Parents do the best job that they can with what they know. The unfortunate thing is that most people are incredibly limited in regards to knowing how to care for themselves and the spirit of others. This is the whole reason for why I created this program to begin with, to increase what you know, and then to show you how to apply this new knowledge. Okay, here's example number 2 for where our negative thoughts and beliefs may come from. When you were growing up at home, did you ever experience the belief that children should be seen and not heard? Or that you had to be a member of the Clean Your Plate Club? Or that you were born out of original sin and were somehow tainted right from the start? If so, would you agree that these ideas could have strongly shaped how you might react toward yourself and others in adult life? You bet they would. I work with clients all the time who have difficulty being assertive because of that first belief, children should be seen and not heard, or who have trouble losing weight because of the second belief, you got to clean your plate. And I've worked with more people than I'd like to admit who have struggled in life because of the third belief, which stemmed from their religious upbringing. Now, I'm not trying to be depressing or anything. I don't want to be the bummer here. I'm just trying to explain where these negative thoughts come from. After all, our past is designed so that we can go back and review what works for us and what doesn't. Even though many of us would rather keep some doors shut, it's often necessary to open those doors so that we can review the learnings from either our own mistakes or from the mistakes of others. Otherwise, all the pain was suffered for naught. Don't be afraid of going back through some of the yucky things that might have happened to you as you were growing up. As Martin Luther King once said, "Only in darkness can you see the stars." I suggest you rewind the tape right now and listen to what you just heard a couple more times. There was a lot of wisdom in that last paragraph, and I want to make sure that you received it. So go on, rewind it, and I'll be waiting for you when you come back. Even though you may feel like there's a whole CD full of negative thoughts and beliefs playing around in your head that weren't put there by you, you are still the one that gets up every morning and turns on the CD player. That means that you are also the one who has the ability, yes, I said ability, the power to put on a new CD right now. A CD that plays positive, loving, and supportive affirmations and beliefs that empower and excite you. Like I said before, you do not have to be a slave to your past, and blaming others for past actions is useless. When you blame others, all you do is hold that negative energy inside of you. And who do you think that negative energy holds back? That's right, you. They're not holding the grudge, you are. That means that you are the one that's hanging on to the hurt or anger. Does this seem fair? I've worked with too many people who've been punishing themselves for crimes they did not commit. So I want you to remember that no matter how you got to where you are now, you always have the power and ability to make things different in your life. And it starts by reviewing your beliefs, attitudes, and thoughts, no matter what they are. I strongly recommend that if your current beliefs and self-statements are no longer serving you in your highest good, change them so that they are. Just change them. This is where your power lies, and the ability to mold your existing thoughts into loving, empowering, supportive beliefs. William James, the father of modern psychology, once stated that the greatest discovery of the 20th century was when man realized that he could change the quality of his life through changing the quality of his thinking. Without fail, as soon as I finish that last statement, someone in my audience will ask me, "So how do you change the quality of your thinking?" Well, stick around, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. Now it's time for the most important portion of our program. In this section, you will learn how to transform your self-limiting thoughts into powerful, enthusiastic, empowering beliefs. So let's talk about the place where all of this transformation is going to take place: your mind. I remember reading once that the mind was like an empty field, and you are the farmer responsible for sowing your own field. Because we're farmers of our own mental field, it's completely up to us what will be planted and grown. The way I understand it, we have three choices. 1, we can plant nourishing, healthy seeds, which will eventually develop into a hearty harvest. 2, we can stick garbage into the ground and cover it up with dirt. Or option 3 is to not do anything with the field and just see what happens. The point is that whatever you plant is exactly what you're going to get back. Like it says in the good old Bible, you reap what you sow. If you plant corn, no Indiana farmer would expect to get beans back. If you plant corn, you're going to get corn. That makes sense, right? So if you plant garbage, what are you going to get back? Precisely, you're going to get back garbage. And that's exactly what people have been reaping for way too long. Too many of us have been supporting garbage thoughts, thoughts that are negative, critical, judgmental, worrisome, and unsupportive. As a result, they've been harvesting stressful, unsatisfying, and depressive feelings and the circumstances to go along with it. Now maybe you're thinking, "Well, Tim, I just don't know what to plant in my mental garden, so I guess I'll just choose option number 3, which is to leave it alone and see what happens." Do you remember the example I gave about what happens when you leave a garden unattended? It will become overgrown with weeds, right? And in our mental garden, the weeds represented negative thoughts. Now, do you really want your mind overrun with negative thoughts? Or more importantly, is it already? If so, it's time to do a little mental gardening. After all, to leave your life completely up to chance, with the odds already stacked against you because of the weeds, is a risky and unfulfilling way to live. And it doesn't make any sense either, since you have this incredible field of opportunity just sitting there, waiting for you to cultivate it. All you have to do is start planting the right seeds. The earth, your subconscious mind, will do the rest. That's all the farmers do. They stick the seeds into the ground, water them occasionally, and after a couple of months go by, they return to find a bountiful field before them. If you began working your mental field right now, within a couple of months, you too could have a wonderful feeling of abundance in your life. So where do you begin? There is a 4-step process that I personally use and that I teach my clients to use to create a strong, positive mental attitude. This 4-step process is vital for experiencing the power of optimism. However, before we discuss the 4 steps, it's important to distinguish how the mind works. Simply put, there are 2 parts of the mind that you need to be concerned with: your conscious and subconscious mind. Here's a question for you. Tell me what your conscious mind is and what it does. Go ahead, if you're in the car, I'm listening. What does your conscious mind do? Very good. You might have said that your conscious mind is the part of you that thinks, or the part of you that makes judgments, and you would be right. Or you might have just sat there and said, my mind is completely blank. If that was you, raise your hand. Go on, don't be shy. Heck, the first time I was asked what the conscious mind was, I wasn't sure either. The conscious mind is the part of us that looks, listens, and learns. It's the part of us that makes decisions and decides what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. Now tell me, what is the subconscious mind and what does it do? Again, the crowd goes silent. The subconscious mind does three very important things. First, it controls all of the involuntary systems of your body. It makes sure to keep your heart beating, your lungs breathing, your blood circulating. It basically keeps you alive. The second thing it does is hold all of your beliefs, life experiences, and schemas in a kind of memory storehouse in the back of your brain. Finally, the third thing that the subconscious mind is in control of, and this is what you should be most concerned with, is the manifestation of thoughts and suggestions that are held constant in your conscious mind. Let me say that again. Your subconscious mind manifests thoughts that are held constant in your conscious mind. To say it another way, the things you think about the most, your subconscious mind tries to create. Remember our little phrase? What you think about comes about. To be honest, the first time I heard this, it scared the crap out of me. For one thing, I had never paid much attention to the things I said to myself, and therefore I had no idea what I was currently manifesting into my life. Plus, when I first began learning how to develop my own positive mental attitude, my thoughts were filled with negativity and insecurity, the very two things I was trying to escape from. Yes, I did say that I had to learn how to develop my own positive mental attitude. Because I'm so positive now, people tend to think that I was born an optimist, but I wasn't. I had great parents and a really good childhood, but I still grew up insecure and viciously critical of myself. Because I was so tough on me, I immediately felt anxious and scared at the first sign of trouble. That's one of the main reasons why I created this optimism program. I realized that the more I learned about myself, the more I learned about you and everyone else. Human beings are funny in this way. We all think we are alone and that nobody would understand what we are going through. And because we try so hard to hide it, we never realize that anyone else is experiencing the same types of fears, worries, and negative beliefs. Only the situations are different. Since I learned so effectively how to take care of myself and how to become successful from the inside out, I can now share the steps and secrets with you. So are you ready to discuss those 4 steps to creating an optimistic, winning attitude? Come on, I really want to hear you say it. Are you ready? Fantastic. Step number 1 of the 4-step process is to become more aware of what you're saying to yourself on a regular basis. You are constantly planting thoughts and ideas into your subconscious mind, which is the part of you most responsible for manifesting those ideas into your reality. So you must first tune in to that little voice in your head and pay closer attention to what it's saying. You know that little voice I'm talking about, the part of you that's constantly talking to yourself or playing out those mini movies in the theater of your imagination. Believe it or not, that inner dialogue you have with yourself is designed to guide, protect, and point you in the direction that seems most beneficial. You may even notice, now that I'm going to point it out, that at times you will hear yourself repeating what I just said in your own mind, so that your subconscious can more clearly understand it. When learning something new for the first time, you will even see people repeating what they just heard out loud, just so that they can hear it in their own words. At times, what I'm saying may even trigger a bunch of other thoughts or memories, which causes you to miss everything I had just said for the last 5 minutes. My brain gets going so fast sometimes when listening to a really good program that I spend 2 hours on it when the program is only about an hour in length because I have to keep rewinding it. But that's okay, because when I'm finished with the program, I will have received more precise understanding from the insights, just because I repeated it to myself enough times that it made really good sense to me. So just remember, it's from this inner dialogue that we come to perceive how we should feel and respond to various situations. So step number 1 of the 4-step process is to become more aware of this inner dialogue so that you know precisely what it is you are conditioning or reinforcing yourself to believe. Those thoughts and images are eventually, if you consistently support them, going to be turned into what you perceive as your current reality. Another reason why it's so important to become aware of your self-talk is because what you say to yourself creates how you feel, and how you feel determines the actions you take. This is one of the biggest life secrets I've learned. What you say to yourself will determine how you feel, and how you feel will determine your behavioral response to other people, situations, or events. For example, let's say that you have a test coming up next week. An optimist might think, "I'm going to do great on this test." Because the thoughts are positive and encouraging, the optimist would feel calm, confident, and motivated about passing the exam. This motivation would drive the optimist into taking action by studying and properly preparing for the test. As a result, because of the preparation, the optimist would produce a satisfying grade, which would serve to reinforce the belief in oneself. Keep in mind, it was the action which produced the result, not just the positive thinking. In the same example, a pessimist might have thoughts of worry or uncertainty, perhaps visualizing not being able to remember the answers. Because the pessimist is already thinking like a failure, feelings of despair, hopelessness, or frustration would most likely emerge. As a result, the behavior would become that of a procrastinator. Studying is put off because it wouldn't do any good anyway. And since there was no preparation, worse fears are realized with a poor test score, which then reinforces the original belief that, as predicted, I'm not smart enough or good enough to pass this test. That's when you hear the motto of a pessimist loud and clear. "I told you so. I knew this was going to happen. This is why I don't get my hopes up, so I won't be disappointed." I'm starting to think that in the minds of people who use these types of excuses, it's almost a way of releasing them from the responsibility of their own actions. I don't know. What do you think? So here are a couple of suggestions for becoming more aware of what you're saying to yourself. Suggestion number 1 is to get out some Post-it notes or some scrap pieces of paper and write down the following phrase. What am I thinking about? What am I thinking about? Make several notes like this and put them all over the place. Put one on your computer screen, one on your nightstand in the bedroom, on the mirror in your bathroom, on the refrigerator, in the car, at work, everywhere you go throughout the day. Put up a little reminder to help you become more aware of what it is you're saying to yourself, what it is you're thinking about. This will greatly help you in becoming more cognizant of how you're programming yourself on a daily basis. Step number 2 is to stop, challenge, and eliminate the thoughts you identify as being negative. The mind can only hold one thought at a time, and if you were to reduce each thought down to a feeling, you would discover that most thoughts tend to make us feel either good, bad, or indifferent. It is only the negative thoughts that need to be stopped, challenged, and eliminated. Before we can proceed any further, I need to ask you a couple of questions just for clarification. Do you get anything positive and productive out of making yourself feel bad? If you said no, are you sure? And is there anything wrong with feeling good about yourself? If you said no, are you sure? I asked you if you're sure because most people say they don't get anything constructive out of feeling bad, and there's nothing wrong with feeling good, but they still insist on spending more time making themselves feel bad than good. If you think I'm exaggerating, consider this. Are you one of those people who does 9 things really well and then messes up on one thing, and that's what you focus on for the rest of the night? If you kind of laughed just now and nodded your head, you'd be among the other 2/3 of the population that do the same exact thing. Why is it when we look back at our childhood, all the bad things seem to come to mind, and we really have to put effort into remembering the good things that happen? It's simply because we have become so used to looking for the negative that we just do it automatically. Again, I'm not trying to dampen the mood. I'm simply trying to make you aware of what most people are doing without realizing it. After all, you cannot change a behavior until you first become more aware of that behavior. Oh boy, I'm starting to sound like a psychotherapist again, aren't I? Another reason why we tend to focus so much on negative outcomes is because the part of the brain in control of this actually has a larger mass. It's actually bigger than the part of our brain that monitors the positive. Why? Well, I believe the Creator put us together this way so that we had a built-in mechanism to protect us against danger. We also have another built-in mechanism that's called the fight or flight response. This response, coupled with the part of us that's always watching out for negative or dangerous situations, probably kept our ancestors from being gobbled up by dinosaurs. The problem now, however, is that there are no dinosaurs, but these primal systems keep firing off in us like there are. The point here is not to get too alarmed over those negative thoughts that form in your mind, for those thoughts are actually just trying to keep you aware of all the possible outcomes, so that you can mentally prepare yourself for the future. The thoughts shouldn't be used to scare or make you feel bad, but rather to empower you so that a solid game plan for how you might respond to any given situation can be formulated ahead of time. So again, step number 2 is to stop, challenge, and eliminate all negative thoughts that pop into your mind. Become aware of the negative thought, challenge it, and think about how your mind might be trying to protect you. Then eliminate it, because nothing productive comes out of making yourself feel bad, and there's nothing wrong with feeling good. Right? Right? Now, every once in a while someone will say, "Tim, how do you know if the thought is negative?" Well, if you wouldn't say the same thing to your best friend, to a child, or to someone that you really love, then don't say it to yourself. Or you can simply check your gut feeling. If when you have the thought you suddenly feel sad, down, discouraged, or frustrated, it's a pretty good clue that the thought is negative and you should just get rid of it. My clients have often told me that they had a difficult time stopping the negative thoughts as well. If they tried to ignore them, the thoughts seemed to just come back louder in their mind. Well, that's true. Remember, your brain is trying to protect you, and if you pretend not to hear the message, your brain will bombard you with it until it's acknowledged. This is why, when we first try to not think negatively, it feels as though we start having more negative thoughts than ever before. But have hope, my friend, for I'm going to share with you a couple of awesome techniques that have proven their effectiveness time and again for stopping and eliminating that stinkin' thinking. The first technique is an old behavior modification strategy. You wear a rubber band around your wrist, which helps remind you to be more aware of your thoughts. When a negative thought comes to mind, you don't start challenging it right away. You are to snap that rubber band a good one. You give yourself a good painful reminder that the physical discomfort you just felt falters in comparison to the mental and emotional discomfort you'll feel if you continue to support your negative thinking. Most people are conditioned to avoid pain and seek out pleasure. If every time you have a negative thought you are rewarded with pain, you will begin to consciously work very hard at thinking more positive. And don't worry, I've never had a client burst into my office with a swollen wrist screaming that they couldn't stop their negative thinking. I have, however, had quite a few clients tell me that they went through a lot of rubber bands. The second strategy is a personal favorite of mine, and it's the one that I utilize the most. Now I have to warn you, when I first heard this technique, I thought, that's silly, how's that going to work? But I have a very open mind, so I decided to give it a try before condemning it. Later that day, I experienced a persistent negative thought. So I used this technique, and the thought stopped immediately. I couldn't believe it. So I started utilizing the technique all week, and it worked every single time I used it. Then I got really excited and started teaching my clients this little mind trick, and it worked for them as well. I even had a client who was having alcohol withdrawals say that when he used the technique, the cravings would actually stop for a while. So I recommend that you try out this easy little technique and witness the power of it for yourself. It's such a simple tool, but the effects are amazing. Are you ready for it? When you catch yourself entertaining a negative thought, I want you to say to yourself, cancel, clear. That's it. Cancel, clear. Now I know what you're thinking, because I thought it myself, but it works, so try it. Cancel, clear. You cancel out the thought and then clear your mind for step number 3. So step number 1 is to become more aware of what you're saying to yourself on a daily basis. Step number 2 is to stop, challenge, and eliminate all negative thoughts that pop into mind. Step number 3 is to replace the negative thought with a positive thought. This is the most important step in the whole process. You must begin replacing the negative, self-limiting, fearful thoughts with positive, optimistic, empowering self-statements. Remember the metaphor of your mental garden and the negative weeds that try to grow within it? What would happen if you were to walk into a real garden and pull out a weed? Another weed would just grow right back in its place, right? And that's exactly what will happen if you just stop a negative thought in your mental garden. Another negative thought will simply take its place. That's why it's incredibly important to replace the negative thought with a positive, supportive, and loving self-statement. Have I said that enough times? It's at this time that 2 questions arise. 1, what if I have trouble thinking of a positive thought to replace the negative thought with? And 2, what if I don't believe the positive thought that I say to myself? So let's start with the first question. If you have trouble thinking of something positive to say to yourself, here's a marvelous little trick that will help produce many supportive self-statements for you to choose from. I want you to pretend that your best friend, a child, or somebody that you really love and care about has just said the same negative thought to herself that you had just said to yourself. What would you say to make her feel better? You will find a variety of positive statements that you could say to this person to make her feel better will immediately come to mind. Simply take what you would say to her and say it to yourself. Cool technique, huh? If your best friend just made a silly mistake, would you call him an idiot and kick him in the knee? I hope not. What could you say instead that would make him feel better? I bet a couple of things just popped into mind, right? You'll never run out of positive things to say if you just get your mind to generate them for you. It seems that we are so much better at taking care of others than we are at taking care of ourselves. So the next time you're having trouble coming up with something positive to say to yourself, just think of what you would say to that best friend, and then pretend that this best friend is you. Hopefully, after a while, you won't have to pretend anymore. Now, what if you say this new positive statement to yourself and you don't believe it? My advice is to say it anyway. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. You have to keep saying something to yourself enough times until your subconscious mind absorbs and accepts what you're saying as truth. You see, the way the mind works is that whatever it hears most, it begins to believe. So if you want to believe in something better for yourself, it starts by saying something better to yourself over and over until you finally buy into it. When I give this advice, every once in a while someone will say, well, if I don't believe what I'm saying, Aren't I just lying to myself? My response is no. You are not lying to yourself. You are merely defining how you wish to be. All things are created twice, first in your mind and then in reality. So you need to start defining in your mind, through your thoughts, what it is that you want to feel, have, and become. Your subconscious mind will take it from there, turning your new thoughts into your new reality. As Dr. Phil McGraw puts it, you have to name it before you can claim it. So again, you are not lying to yourself, but merely stating that this is what you'd like to believe. And if you keep saying it, you will. Finally, step number 4, which is simply to practice and repeat steps 1 through 3 until they become strongly ingrained habits. So let's practice going over the first 3 steps to creating that strong, positive mental attitude, which will ultimately lead to developing an optimistic way of living. Normally, I would ask the audience to give me a couple of negative thoughts that might pop into mind on a regular basis. The following are the most frequent responses I receive. I can't do it. I'll fail. I'm fat. And I don't deserve it. So let's start with the first one, I can't do it, and work our way down the list. When you tell yourself that you can't do something, how does it make you feel? Good or bad? Your first response, your initial gut feeling. It probably makes you feel bad, right? So we will consider this a negative thought. Now that we are aware that I can't do it is a negative thought, what's the next step? Very good. The next step is to stop, challenge, and eliminate it. At this point, you could ask yourself why you feel that way. Or you could challenge yourself by asking, what would it take so that I could do it? Then you would eliminate the negative thought by enlisting one of your thought-stopping strategies. For example, you could give that good old rubber band a snap on the wrist. Or you could simply say to yourself, what 2 words? Yes, cancel, clear. Now that you have stopped the negative thought, what's the next step? That's right, it's time to replace the negative thought with a positive thought. Something that makes you feel more encouraged, more supported, and more hopeful. Instead of telling yourself that you can't do it, what would you like to believe about yourself? Most people respond with, well, I would like to believe that I can do it. So that's what you start saying to yourself, even if you don't believe it at first. Remember, step number 4 is to practice and repeat saying this positive statement to yourself repeatedly. Fake it till you make it. Keep telling yourself, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, until you can. Remember that little choo-choo that could? I think I can, I think I can, I know I can, I know I can, I can, I can, I can. Just keep telling yourself it until you believe it. There's an expression that goes, seeing is believing. But I strongly feel that believing will also help you to see. Many people struggle with the fear that they can't do something or that they will fail if they tried. I myself had struggled with that very belief, but here's what I did to overcome it. I remember being 25 years old and telling myself that I had no musical talent whatsoever. I had always wanted to play a musical instrument, but I was convinced that I just couldn't do it. One day, that thought popped into mind, and I decided to run it through the 4 steps. I realized that this belief was not making me feel good, so I began to challenge it. I tried to figure out where this idea of not possessing any musical talent came from. After all, I never really took a music class, and I've never had any kind of lesson. In fact, the only memory that even came to mind was when I was at a college party and there was a piano sitting in the living room, and I remember sitting down and banging on the keys, and it sounded awful. I'm not sure what I was expecting. Perhaps Beethoven's spirit was supposed to flow through my fingertips and begin playing Symphony No. 9 in D minor. But that was not the case, and from that silly little experience, I had deduced that I hadn't an ounce of musical ability. But then I started asking myself, who do I know that can sit down without any musical training and start playing like Beethoven? The only guy I could think of was Beethoven. I had been reinforcing this negative belief that I had no musical talent based on one minor experience. It made me wonder what other irrational beliefs I had been supporting based on nothing. So right then and there I moved into step number 3, which is to replace the negative thought with a more positive, empowering self-statement. I started telling myself that in fact I do have musical talent and I simply need to hone in on my skills. That thought made me feel better. And because it felt so good, my subconscious mind immediately went to work on manifesting my new reality. The very next day, the man who would later become my father-in-law handed me a harmonica and a book entitled Music for the Musically Hopeless. Coincidence? I don't think so. So I'd like you to consider challenging some of those old beliefs and negative self-statements that you've been keeping alive for all these years. Wouldn't it be tragic if you spent your whole life holding yourself back because of beliefs that weren't even true? Please don't make that mistake. As Wayne Dyer always says, don't leave this place with your music still inside of you. Now what can you do with the thought, I'll fail? Well, the first thing I would do is challenge that belief with the idea that the only way that you can fail is to not try. Besides, if you try and you do fail, you'll just be back to where you're at right now, so you really wouldn't lose anything. Actually, you know what? You would still be ahead, because now you would have even more wisdom from the experience of failing. Because you had the courage to go for your dreams, no matter what the outcome, you will have gained a tremendous amount of knowledge about yourself and the activity that you went for. Anyone who goes for it and misses is never a failure in my book, but a winner. The problem here is that you're asking yourself the wrong question. Instead of saying, what if I fail? You need to start asking yourself, what if I succeed? Just like with I can't, perhaps you should be asking yourself, what if I could? You see, that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And remember, whatever you look for hard enough, you will find, right? So make sure that you are looking for what you want. If you say to yourself, what if I fail? Your subconscious will immediately look for ways to fail. But if you start asking yourself, what if I succeed? Your mind will immediately begin searching for ways to do just that. Now we will deal with negative self-statements that attack our physical appearance. I don't think I've done a lecture yet where someone didn't stand up and say, I'm fat, and then proceed to pick on themselves right there in front of everybody. I could write a whole book on this subject alone. In fact, I did, in a program called Losing Weight Without Losing Your Mind. In that program, I discuss how easy it is to become dangerously overweight in this country. Living in the Midwest, I can't drive 1 mile without seeing a fast food restaurant or a billboard for one. Plus, because society teaches us that more is better and everything should be done faster, most of the population turns to and overindulges in unhealthy foods as a way of coping with the stress that our busy lifestyles promote. So let me ask you this. Does calling yourself names and picking on yourself make you feel any better? Does it make you want to get out there and exercise? Or does it depress you and get you to want to lay on the couch with a bag of chips and watch some more TV? When we say negative things to ourselves, it sucks the life right out of us. We begin to feel as though our situation is hopeless. And so, of course, we act that way. So again, I ask, what would you like to believe about yourself? Instead of saying, I'm fat, you could say, I am now in the process of losing weight and feeling great. What if you don't believe it? Then you fake it till you make it. You say it until your subconscious mind has no other choice but to believe it. Again, I will say this because it is so important. What you think about comes about. What you say to yourself the most will become your reality. So if you don't like your current reality, I suggest you change it by modifying what you're saying to yourself. This is where it starts, and you can begin immediately. In the last section of this program, I am going to discuss the final negative self-statement, I don't deserve it, and show you why in fact you absolutely do deserve whatever you want in life. And the best way to get what you want is by adopting an optimistic approach to life. This approach will get you excited about the possibilities that lie waiting in your future, because you can get yourself so pumped up from believing in what could be, you will experience a motivation and drive that thrusts you into taking action. And this drive will help you persist until your future dreams become your current reality. Thousands of people achieve their goals and dreams every day, so why can't you be one of them? Just remember two principles. 1, life rewards action, and 2, the whole time you're looking for success, success is also looking for you. Coming up, we're going to talk about why you deserve to be successful in life and how to make it happen. Welcome back. This is the most exciting part of the program for me, because this is the portion of the program where I help you to begin to realize how wonderful and special and talented and fantastic you really are. I'm going to spend the rest of this program pumping you up and getting you feeling good about yourself. Often, we don't see how special we really are, and it takes somebody else to point it out to us. And how often does that happen? So I'm going to do it for you right now. I want to give you a fresh perspective on yourself, and I'm not worried at all about it going to your head. Life will keep you humble enough. It's just vitally important to have a few sources or channels through which positive, loving feedback and support can flow in. Otherwise, all we're left with are negative sources of input. And if that's all you're hearing, then that's how you're going to start thinking and feeling, which is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do here. So if what I say does go straight to your head, wonderful. That would be just fine. Now it's time to address the final negative self-statement, I don't deserve it. This is a very common self-limiting belief that more people support than you'd think. At first, I couldn't believe how many people thought that they didn't deserve to feel good about themselves, to be happy, have money, or be successful. When I asked them why not, the general response was something like, it's okay for other people, but not for me. I've just never been very lucky in my life. If I deserved those things, I would have them already. I'm just not good enough. Maybe if I had more money, or I was more attractive, or I was thinner, or I had a better life partner, then I might deserve blank, blank, blank. If we run these thoughts through our 4-step optimism creating process, step 1 would identify that these thoughts do not make us feel good, so they are considered negative. In step 2, we'd begin challenging those little saboteurs so that we could quickly terminate them. Right now, to further demonstrate the process of turning negatives into positives, I'm going to run these negative thoughts through step number 3. All of those excuses or justifications for why you don't deserve to feel happy, successful, or fulfilled seem to stem from the same core negative belief that you're just not good enough. When someone says, it's okay for other people but not for me, my immediate response is, why not for you? What makes everyone else so much better than you? Does that make sense? Every single person on the planet is better than you? No. Does it seem rational that it's okay for everyone else to feel good, but not you? Where did you get this belief from? Do you recall if your father or mother believed this about him or herself? When you were a kid, did anyone ever tell you those things were okay for other people but not for you? If so, do you still want to support that belief? It's at this time that some people will make the mistake of saying to me, quote, "Well, life just isn't fair and sometimes you don't have a choice," unquote. When I hear this, I immediately muster as much love and understanding as possible, and then I gently reply, "Yes, this is true. Life is not fair, but so what?" Once you begin to accept that life is difficult, it doesn't seem that difficult anymore. And as far as not having a choice, you will always have a choice, even if it's only in how you're going to respond to a certain person, emotion, or event. You always have control and choice over that. Have you ever thought, I've just never been very lucky in my life? In my experience, luck has nothing to do with it. People who find themselves in the right place at the right time found themselves in those situations because of the thoughts they had been delivering to their subconscious mind. If you consistently keep ending up in the wrong place at the wrong time, then it's probably because of the choices that you are either making now or as a result of the choices you've made in the past. But if I deserve those things, I would already have them. Well, what actions have you taken to acquire those things? Most of the time we make excuses for ourselves, rationalizing why we don't have what we want, and even blaming others for it. But when you look at the person's track record who's making this type of statement, you'll see that they never really took persistent action to get what they wanted. Sometimes it's just easier to say it's too hard than to actually do the work that it would take to realize your dream. All of these fearful thoughts seem to keep coming back to that insidious belief that we are not good enough, we are not worthy enough, and we are not capable enough of creating the life that we desire. So when logic fails and positive thinking just isn't enough, I turn to faith. In my belief system, there is a perfect, all-knowing, and infinite energy that exists in everything. I call this energy God. Because God is a part of everything, the body, mind, spirit, and all the spaces in between, that means that God is also a part of me and a part of you. At times, I ask myself, "Self, do you believe that God makes mistakes?" The immediate reply is, well, if God is perfect and all-knowing, then the answer is no, God does not make mistakes. I love this answer because it affirms that I am not a mistake. And if I am good enough for God, then I am sure as heck good enough for you, and I can finally begin to treat myself as though I'm good enough for me. And the same goes for you. Now that doesn't mean that I couldn't get better or rise towards a fuller potential. But it does mean that I am okay, I am good enough, and I am worthy enough right now, simply because I am a living creation of God. Thank you. Can I have an amen? Alright, I didn't mean to go off on my preaching, but I meant every word I said, and everything that I applied to myself also applies to you. This means that you are good enough and worthy enough right now, simply because you are a living creation of God. You don't have to do or be anything else. Just be yourself. If God wanted you to be another way, He and she would have made you that way. Maybe you're one of those people who feels that if they had more money or looked different, then you too could have it all. If so, I'd like you to consider that you might be using these ideas as an excuse for not taking action. Perhaps it's because, what if I fail? Remember how to turn that one around? That's right. What if I succeed? Besides, who cares if you fail? At least you tried. I strongly believe that it's better to try and fail than to look back on life full of regrets and what-ifs. Heck, one of my favorite quotes is, "I shall fail my way to the top." Even Benjamin Franklin, one of the greatest inventors of all time, once remarked that if you keep working until you run out of failures, the only thing left is success. All right, it is story time. I love story time. The following parable will hopefully make you aware of the awesome potential that already exists within you. All you have to do is muster up the strength and courage and faith to believe in yourself. If you do, you shall be greatly rewarded. This is a story I heard Wayne Dyer tell, and I thought it was a marvelous illustration of what we human beings sometimes go through. It's called The Stonecutter. There once was a stonecutter who would take chunks of rock and stone and mold them into various forms, shapes, and sizes. It was very hot where he worked, and he was sweating profusely as he chiseled upon his stones. One day, while working in the village, he saw a very wealthy man moving from one vendor to another, buying up whatever caught his eye. He bought apples and blankets and bracelets, and the stonecutter thought, "Boy, if I had that kind of money, I'd really be happy then." Suddenly, poof, he became very wealthy. So he started moving around the marketplace, buying whatever his heart desired. One day, while he was shopping, a prince came through the market, being carried on a beautiful platform. The stonecutter thought to himself, "Wow, if I had that kind of attention, I'd really be happy then." Suddenly, poof, he became a prince. Now he was being carried through the market, and people were actually fanning him because it was so hot. And even though he was covered by a canopy, he still found himself wet with perspiration. He thought to himself, "What great power is this to make me so hot? After all, I'm a prince." He looked up over his canopy and saw the sun. He chuckled to himself, "Now if I had that kind of power, I would really be happy then." Poof! He became the sun. Now as the sun, he was glimmering brightly in the sky, shining down on the fields. And one day, this object moved in front of him, blocking his rays from the earth. "What amazing presence is this?" he exclaimed, and found that it was a cloud. He laughed to himself and thought, "Now if I had that kind of presence, I'd really be happy then." So what do you think happened? That's right. Poof! He became a cloud. Now he was moving over the fields and raining down upon the crops. But one day, as he was floating around in the sky, a strange invisible force pushed him from one side over to the other and back. "What incredible force is this?" "Ah," he thought to himself, "this is the wind. Now if I had that kind of force, I would really be happy then." So, come on, say it with me. Poof! He became the wind. Now he was moving through the sky and blowing across the fields, and one day he came across this huge piece of stone. He felt robust being the wind, so he proceeded to blow and push against that stone. But no matter how hard he pushed, he could not budge it. After several days of trying, he thought to himself, "Now that's it. If I had that kind of power and strength and presence, I would be the happiest of them all." So, poof, he became the stone. And there he stood, strong, proud, and mighty. For months he sat there laughing at anything that tried to budge him. Ha ha ha! But one day he felt a strange kind of movement, a shifting and reshaping of his bottom half. He thought to himself, "What incredible, amazing force is this?" And he looked down and saw before him a stonecutter. "Ah, I know, grasshopper." Take your time. You see, the stonecutter thought that if he had more money, power, or force, if he could just be someone or something else, this would make him feel happy and fulfilled. What he didn't realize was that the power to feel this way had already been inside of him the entire time. You know, the stonecutter parable reminds me a lot of a movie you've probably seen. It's called The Wizard of Oz, where the main character, Dorothy, had the power to return home throughout the entire movie. But it wasn't until the conclusion that she finally realized the power she sought from someone else, the wizard, had been inside of her the whole time. Most people are familiar with that old adage that the grass is always greener on the other side. My grandfather used to tell me, "Tim, that's because there's more bullshit over there." Good old grandpa. The moral of this story is to realize that you already have the talent, ability, and strength inside of you to make all of your dreams come true, and every optimist knows it. So if the thought that "I don't deserve it" ever pops into mind again, I want you to immediately stop, eliminate, and replace it with the thought that "I do deserve to have what I want, and now I'm going to take action to get it." Once you start believing that it is possible for you to be healthy, wealthy, and happy, your next optimistic step would be to formulate a game plan for attracting what you want into your life. The first thing I recommend doing is writing down everything that you'd like to do, have, and accomplish in your life before you die. I call it my lifetime to-do list. Write down everything that comes to mind, everything you'd like to do before you leave this planet. Anything that you would like to do at all, whether it's write a book, climb a mountain, make $1 million, travel the world, whatever it is, the sky's the limit. Don't hold back. This is your dream list, so don't worry if you'll ever be able to do it or not. I don't care if you're 90 years old and you want to swim across the Atlantic Ocean in your skivvies. If this is what you want, write it down. This list is designed to inspire you, to get your creative juices flowing, to get that sparkle back in your eye. I can't tell you how many times I've written down lists of things that I wanted to accomplish, only to lose those lists and rediscover them down the road. And when I did find those lists, I found that I had achieved everything on them. And it's not that I'm any more productive or special than you. I just wrote it down. So I strongly encourage that you write down everything you would love to do, even if you think it's impossible. People throughout history have been doing the impossible, so don't let it stop you from writing it down. Putting your thoughts on paper seems to dramatically increase the power of those thoughts. Even if you feel like the odds are 1,000,000 to 1, wouldn't you want to be that one? If so, then this is a great place to begin. After you define what your goals are, prioritize them and decide what goal on that list you would like to most achieve first. Then, start asking yourself the same question over and over until you have a solid game plan for how to achieve that goal. What is that one question you repeatedly ask yourself? A friend of mine, Doug Smith, taught me how to create a strategic plan for my business on a cue card. Every time I ran across a challenge, or a problem in the language of someone who's supporting a pessimistic attitude, Doug would say to me, "What will it take to overcome that?" Whether I had trouble figuring out where to begin, or I got stuck somewhere along the process, Doug would always ask me the same question: what would it take? What would it take? So I want you to begin asking yourself, once you define what your goal is, what will it take for you to make this happen? If you're not quite sure, then the first thing you need to do is get out there and educate yourself so that you do know what it's going to take, and then you immediately take charge. Once you learn the steps involved in achieving your long-term goal, you will then need to define each step that will build up to it. These are called your short-term goals. As you define each step of the process, continue asking yourself, what will it take to make this happen? And you will be quite surprised. If you keep asking the question, your subconscious mind will keep generating the answer. But don't take my word for it. Try it out for yourself. Perhaps you should start with maybe a smaller life goal, like finishing a book or taking a trip. Ask yourself what it will take to accomplish this, and then go from there. Remember, the longest journey always begins with the first step, so get steppin'. You'll be glad you did. I'd like to conclude with 10 final tips on living in a spirit of optimism. Tip number 1. You are only fully responsible for one person in your life, and that person is you. So make sure to take the best possible care of yourself that you can. Your job is not to rescue the world, but to enjoy it. Besides, the world could really use some more positive role models. Tip number 2. People will treat you the way you treat yourself, so please treat yourself well. Tip number 3. If you look for the highest good in a person, they will live up to it. Of course, if you look for the worst in somebody, they will live up to that as well. Tip number 4. Dwell on happy thoughts and fun times. These memories will produce wonderful feelings. This is much better than dwelling on unhappy thoughts. After all, what will they produce? Tip number 5. Be persistent in your pursuit of happiness. You never know when that next step will produce the results you've been hoping for. Don't make the same mistake the miner made when he stopped digging just 6 inches short of the gold. Tip number 6. Look for beauty wherever you go, and you will find it, even if sometimes you have to look really hard. Tip number 7. Remember that the best things in life aren't things. Tip number 8. Don't sweat the small stuff, and keep in mind it's all small stuff. There will always be at least one stressful thing hanging over your head. But if you soothingly remind yourself that life has a miraculous way of always working those situations out, you'll never have to waste any energy on worrying. After all, how many times have you thought to yourself, how am I going to get through this? And yet, here you are, and you're doing just fine. Tip number 9, smile more. This one's my favorite. It's free, it feels really good, and it's contagious. And finally, tip number 10 is to have as much fun as you can possibly have without ending up in the slammer. After all, life seems dullest when we can't remember the last time we really enjoyed ourselves, right? And you know what else? I've yet to work with one person who was near death that complained that they didn't spend enough time at the office, or who regretted not finishing that last load of laundry. No way! Instead, they wished that they had spent more time with their families, or more time having fun, or that they had taken better care of their teeth and the rest of their body. I have made it a point to learn from the unfortunate mistakes of others, so that the struggles they suffered were not in vain. As often as I can, I come up with something that I can look forward to every day. That activity, even if it's as simple as taking a walk, reading a book, taking a bubble bath, or even renting a movie, they serve as that proverbial carrot which dangles in front of my face, keeping me always moving forward into the direction of my dreams. So there you have it. The things I've covered in this program are just the tip of the optimistic iceberg. There are so many wonderful reasons for why you might want to strengthen your conviction to pursue a state of optimism. And eventually, I'll cover those too. But for now, my hope is that you immediately begin to utilize the strategies and techniques that we've been talking about, and start putting them into action today. Also, don't be afraid to listen to this program a lot. If you're ever feeling down, stick the program in. If you need a jump start, listen to the program. If you have a friend who needs a boost, let them listen in on the program. Just don't give it to them. You have to keep some of these channels open for you, and you need to continuously hear some of these new things. I am constantly reviewing the collection of inspirational and motivational audio programs that I've acquired over the years, and I find myself continuously learning something that I had missed in a prior listening. So don't be afraid to wear out this tape or CD. It'll be one of the best actions you'll ever take. In conclusion, I'd like to end here with a final passage of optimism. One day, God put us on a mountaintop and said, "Come to the edge." We replied, "It's too high." Again God said, "Come to the edge." We might fall. Come to the edge. And we came. And He pushed us off. And we flew. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you. And I hope that your day is a sure success.
For more information or a free catalog containing all of Tim Shurr's programs, please call toll-free 877-944-4673 or visit us on the web at www.shurrsuccess.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope that your day is a sure success.